Right, so is Benjamin Netanyahu actually finally really finished this time? It's not exactly the question on everybody's lips right now, as yet again this is a story getting scant coverage in the media, but it absolutely should be. It's massive, it's huge, it heaps more pressure on him and highlights once again not just the man's criminality, no, not just in terms of what he is doing in Gaza and across the Middle East either, but in terms of what he's doing to benefit himself whilst clinging onto power by his fingertips at this point. Though this is very much still related to Gaza, and actually it's related to Gaza in possibly the most egregious way it ever could be. Sure, the matter of Netanyahu's surviving scandal is certainly a question that has been asked before. It had hardly been Netanyahu's first turn in the dock either. But not only could this potentially see Netanyahu get his comeuppance at last, but has the potential to bring war to an end across the Middle East. So why is it going so unnoticed in the Western media then? Surely this is news we all need to know, right? Right, so Benjamin Netanyahu and police investigations. That's where we're at. And if anybody is deserving of an investigation by the fuzz into their actions, I can't think of many people I'd rather see brought in for questioning than Bibi himself. You can guess what his reaction has been to this though, can't you? It's Netanyahu Bingo really, isn't it? You can list all of his favourite phrases like, that's anti-Semitic, total victory, Israel has a right to self-defence, the ceasefire is off, or words to that effect. But if in your list of things you expect him to say you had unprecedented witch hunt on there, then give yourself a prize. It's the Israeli police investigating here this time though. Investigating an Israeli, as Netanyahu is, so how about he drop the victim act here? Because clearly there must be a credible amount of evidence to investigate here, given it's Israel investing in their own man. And if Netanyahu thought sacking Yoav Gallant as defence minister might help his case internationally by throwing the other guy facing an ICC arrest warrant, if the judges there ever grow a collective spine and get on with it, then it does nothing for his woes domestically here. So what is going on here then, Damo? Well, Israeli police, specifically Laav 433, that's a catchy title, isn't it? Which is the equivalent, if you like, to the FBI in Israel, have been conducting an investigation into Netanyahu for some time, into the events going right back to the night of October 7th, 2023. The timeline of events leading up to that night and the Israeli response to that, which has led to the Gaza Strip being razed to the ground, has been a matter of investigation for quite a while. We've been told ad infinitum that Hamas invaded southern Israel, took hostages and went on a rampage of death and destruction. This is the main narrative that has been sold to us for over a year now, but it's also been heavily disputed for just as long. Egypt, for example, have maintained that they warned Israel something was brewing from Hamas. And of course, in light of that, it's all the more suspicious that there was the watering down of security forces in the area of the Hamas breach on that night, then the Nova Music Festival, which was allowed to go ahead just nearby, which Hamas apparently were not aware of, and so on and so forth. Israel did know this attack was coming, in which case their actions leading up to the night of October 7th have borne more scrutiny. Absolutely they should. The police in Israel appear to have been doing so to answer questions like, how did the Israeli government let this happen? Did they let their people be taken and attacked in order to facilitate a move against Gaza? Now all of that has come to light because of a leaked document, a government leak. As is so often the case when governments are doing something truly awful, a leak has taken place, showing that Israeli forces knew a strike by Hamas was coming as early as the 19th of September last year, 3 weeks before October 7th. And to give credence to this leak, it was actually reported on Israeli state news on TV by Can, which is basically the Israeli equivalent of the BBC. The leaked report is called Detailed End-to-End Raid Training, and this was distributed on September 19th, 2023, and it described in detail what Hamas units were doing, the exercises they were running through, and these included raiding military posts and the kibbutzim, and maintaining the hostages in the Gaza Strip afterwards. It also detailed the intention to take between 200 and 250 hostages, which turned out to be very close to the number that were actually taken, which was 251. All in all of this has raised a lot of questions which have continued to go unanswered to this time. How exactly did Hamas manage to get into Israel? Gaza is the largest open-air concentration camp in the world, after all. It's basically a prison. You can't come and go as you please. 2 years prior to the attack on October 7th, a new security barrier was erected, supposedly making a breach of the Israeli-Gaza border in the north improbable. However, on the night of October 7th, the barrier failed. And even an outlet as pro-Israeli government as the Jerusalem Post has described this as an intelligence and security oversight. But the question now is, was it really an oversight? Another aspect of this was that Nova Music Festival. If this strike was known about, and known about in the detail it was, according to this leaked report, why was that music festival allowed to go ahead? Was this Israeli arrogance that Hamas couldn't possibly manage this, or was it more a case of put even more people in front of them that they could take? Is it still unreasonable to think in those terms now that we know that what Israeli security knew about and yet permitted anyway? Well, a police investigation into all of this has now been rumbling along, apparently, for the last 6 months. And just last Tuesday, the magistrates' court in Rishon LeZion released details which basically confirmed this investigation is real. It's been conjectured up until now, but it is real. It is happening. It is subject to a gag order, but comes fast following another court case relating to another set of information leaks, those involving one of Netanyahu's aides, who has been named as a leaker of classified intelligence information to foreign media outlets, one of which was the Jewish Chronicle here in the UK. Hardly the most trusted of outlets, as their IPSO record attests to, but even they eventually pulled the story when it turned out to be confected garbage. The claim in that instance was regarding alleged plans by Hamas to smuggle Israeli hostages into Egypt, the leak having allegedly happened for Netanyahu's benefit, possibly at his behest, all enabling Netanyahu to once again pull the plug on yet another ceasefire agreement, another set of ceasefire talks, setting them up to fail yet again. That happened last Sunday, so things really do look to be coming unstuck for Netanyahu rather quickly at this point in time. Perhaps this is intentional. Perhaps it's just reached the point finally that Netanyahu is just too much of a liability to Israel's continued existence, backed into a corner they can't fight their way out of. Israel's reputation now irretrievably damaged, and this government has got to go. That thinking obviously plays into Netanyahu's claims of a witch hunt, but there wouldn't be any witch hunt or formal police investigation, as we should call it, if there wasn't dirt to find, would there? Netanyahu has even tried to cover up discussions had on the matter of the war being discussed in Hebrew, by having the transcriptions of those meetings into other languages deliberately falsified, effectively aiming to keep his management of the war untraceable. This is another claim that's coming out. Is that the act of a man conducting a war that is based on a true belief in self-defense? Or more like the actions of a man who has set it up and is almost certainly acting to keep it going? For all of Israel's apparent deliberate inaction allowing the events of October 7th to happen, arguably what has been the most damning evidence for that of all, which has not been subject to a cover-up of restricted on the grounds of confidentiality, has been the numerous reports of Israeli action on the night of October 7th played down in Western media. The IDF unleashed drones, tanks, helicopter gunships, both at the Nova Music Festival and in the nearby kibbutzim, where houses were destroyed and many Israeli civilian casualties resulted, blamed exclusively on Hamas by so much of the media as they have been. But far too many accounts, especially by eyewitnesses and indeed Israeli and other foreign media, saying it was the IDF instead. And that is all aside from the Hannibal Directive Israel allegedly implemented to kill their own people rather than allow them to be taken hostage, that was allegedly in place that night as well. We've all been waiting for Netanyahu to have a day in the dock, where many of us may have suggested that the likeliest place for that would be in The Hague off the back of one of those ICC arrest warrants if they ever get issued. It may end up being a domestic court in Israel instead that it happens. Charging him for committing a war he may have engineered from the very beginning. And if that is so, he'll go down in history as one of the most brutal, genocidal maniacs in history, with the blood of hundreds of thousands of Gazans probably, in all likelihood, on his hands. What we're seeing here may well be the start of the Israeli state turning on a prime minister that is far more of a liability than a benefit now, a threat to the survival of the Israeli state itself even. So this set of events that have ratcheted up a notch just this week bears watching, but also begs the question of so many mainstream news outlets as to why they are not reporting on this story. Because this is huge. It has the potential to rule the entire Israeli response to the night of October 7th as confected and illegal and expose it as an Israeli setup. So where are you guys? Why are you not doing your job? Why are you leaving it up to foreign media, alternative media, and mouthpieces like me to do your job for you again? From start to finish, as many people have already been suspecting, this entire affair, with all the death and destruction it has wrought, has been nothing more than a land grab. And nailing that point down is the now apparent partitioning of part of northern Gaza, all entirely in line with the general's plan, the first bit of Gaza seized by Israel in effect. It's no longer a maybe, it has now happened. Get the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers folks.